Okay, so this is the John Deere I've been working on repainting and getting fixed up and different things so I can flip it and sell it. So here's a picture up in the picture here of what it looked like originally when we first picked it up and was still in the truck. And there was a lot of things wrong with it, but very few things needed parts. I'm going to go through these real quick as you admire the green. I'm kidding, you don't have to admire it, but I do. I really am loving this color. There's the deck. I'll talk about the deck here in a minute. So, where to start? Well, the first thing is the wiring was completely messed up. And the only way to start it was to jump it with the starter. You couldn't use the key. The key didn't work. So, I think one of the very first things I did was I got the push button switch in there. And so the push button switch, all you got to do is turn the key on. That turns on the carburetor solenoid, and then you choke it and you can start it, push the button and it starts. Then what else was next? Let's see, we had the carburetor. It ran, the machine ran great, but the problem was the carburetor was leaking by. So as soon as you turn the fuel on here, the air filter would fill up with gasoline. And of course that can get down in the crankcase, and that's just bad news. So changed out the carburetor, and then there was several just things that needed to be worked on. The tires were misaligned, the front tires, so I had to straighten this tire. And let's see, that was quite the chore actually. The brake, let's see, the brake wasn't working. And so I got into that, and it was just the brake pad had fallen out of it. The part was still there. I didn't have to buy it. It just had fallen out of its place. The gear shifter would not go into reverse. And what it is, the linkage has just gotten old and wore out over time. So I extended it out. I drilled a hole there so the gear shifter could reach the reverse gear, and that works. Now I'm going to put numbers here. I actually have the stickers to put it on right here, so we'll get those put on probably today. I don't know, I got a week to worry about it. I'll tell you what happens in a week. Then let's see, so that was just things I had to fix. And then we came over to the deck, and one of the spindle bearings was bad. Can't remember which one now. And so I had to beat that out, get a new bearing in there. I put in a new chute, and it's not new. It came off a mower I got over there, and it didn't line up exactly correctly, but it was good enough that I thought we could use it. And of course then I painted the whole thing. And that took quite a bit of work. I had to use a drill and get all the old paint off of it, because it was just in bad shape. Typically, if you're just going to repaint something, you can just scuff up the old paint and put new paint on top of it. But it was such a rusted mess that I had to get all the old paint out, because you'd be sanding along, all of a sudden you hit some rust spots, and I just had to clean the whole thing up. And then yesterday, I guess it was the day before yesterday, it occurred to me, I bet the battery is not charging, because like I said, they ripped all the electrical out of it, every bit of it. There was no wire left that was attached to anything. It was just everything dangled. So I've never messed with a Kohler engine or stators or voltage regulators, and none of that stuff, but I have solar panels and I know how DC electric works. So I thought, if this thing's producing any electric, I am going to figure it out. So I put my voltage meter on the battery when it was running, and the battery was not charging. It was quite obvious, and I actually checked it out with the other lawnmower I got up there. It's a Kohler also. As soon as you started that Kohler, the battery started charging, but this one wasn't. So there was 3 wires hanging out here, and I knew that had to go to the stator, but I didn't know how it worked. So I came out with my voltage meter, my multimeter here, and I thought, well, I'll hook up my multimeter in DC to right here, and see if it's producing the electric. Actually, I put it to here is what I did first, and that produced nothing. And then I did here to here, these 2 wires, and that burned up my multimeter instantly. Well, then I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. So I went to YouTube. I had to get a new multimeter, $16 at Walmart. And I learned that the stator, so you have a flywheel that spins around with magnets. And outside the flywheel, or inside the flywheel, I guess it is, you have this copper coiled up thing. And it produces AC electric, not DC, so alternating current. Even though you're charging a DC battery, that stator produces AC. Well, that's why I burned up my multimeter. I was checking it in DC. As soon as I hit the 2 wires, it burned it. So I got a new multimeter, and I still couldn't figure it out because I didn't know what this wire was. I'll tell you what this wire is in a minute. So I'm testing around, nothing's working. Well, last night it occurred to me, what are these 2 wires for? I was so busy worried about this wire for some reason, I never really came back to check these 2 wires. So I hooked up the multimeter to AC to these 2 wires, and sure enough, I was producing 50 volts, exactly what the YouTube video said I was supposed to be producing. So DC, I'll show you what I did. I put it on 200 volts on DC, started it up, and I put the 2 probes to the wires, and it went to 50 volts, exactly the way it was supposed to be. Well, then it was just a matter of watching enough YouTube videos to find out what the voltage regulator did. So you take these 2 wires and you put them, 1 wire on the outside and the other wire on the other outside, which leaves a center. So I did that. Now, all of them said I needed a ground, but I think this one's already grounded. It must be grounded because I didn't need it. I was going to put a ground, but I just didn't need it. This, now, the output of this voltage regulator comes into the center wire here as DC, 14.3 volts. So I figured it out, and I was able to wire it into existing wire that goes into the starting solenoid. It's the right gauge wire. I needed 12 to 14 gauge wires, what I needed, and that was 14. It was a little small, but it'll work. It was not small, it's just on the small side. So I wired that into there, and I started it up, and I was producing voltage. The battery was charging. Instead of 12.1 volts, I was at 13.4. So I brought the lawnmower back up here because I was going to charge the battery today. I took it down to the shed to charge the battery last night, and then I brought it back up here, and then this morning I checked the battery and it was at 12.4. so it did charge. On the small little trip up here, it did charge. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the mower deck back on. Now, the mower deck is not one of these types that you have to manually engage. It has a switch, electric switch, that engages the PTO. So it's electric PTO. So I had to make sure that the battery was charging. Otherwise, as soon as the battery went dead, I wouldn't be producing, the thing would die. So I'm going to put the deck on today, and we're going to mow with it and see how it does. I don't want to scratch the paint, so this is going to look a little silly, but I did it in my socks. I wrote it on my socks. So I'm going to do that again today so I don't scratch the paint and see how it does. .75. so it cuts. It was so dusty that I shut it off. I didn't want to get it completely dirty. You can see I'll have to wash it. So so when it was over on the patio and I turned on the mower deck, I was able to turn it on 3 times. And then it wouldn't turn on anymore. I couldn't figure out what was wrong for the longest time. And then I figured out that this wire had come loose. That was the wire to the PTO. So that was an easy fix. So I'm not going to put a for sale sign on it just yet like I did the other one. You can see the other one's got a for sale sign that never wants to stay on. Because I'm waiting for a seat cover. As soon as I get a seat cover, it's going to be yellow. Then we can put the pad on there and put the seat cover on. You'll never know. But I'm really proud of this one. I mean, it's old. It acts old. But it's a fine cutting machine. It really did cut down the weeds over there. I ran over some branches that Carolyn had been cutting, knocking down, and cut those right up. I really like it. I have thought about selling my newer one, the one I bought a few years ago, and keeping this one, but it just doesn't make any sense. This one's, there's no, you can't find parts for it. So it would just be keeping it together is all you would be doing. So I'm really proud of it. So hope I can inspire you to be proud of it when you're living your dreams. Thanks for watching.